Welcome to another episode of the Crypto Gaming Institute podcast. I'm Ben. We're here on episode 41 with the one, the only, Mr. Bored Elon Musk. How you doing today, man?
Oh man, if I'm ever in like a wrestling match, I want you to do my introduction. That was a lot of hype. Very well done.
Thanks. It's it's one of the trademark skills of a podcaster. You got to be able to make things super hyped. Then you have to have your smooth FM DJ voice. Got to have that locked down. So, anyways, man, thank you so much for coming on the show. Let's dive right into this. I would love to kind of give people like a brief story, not of you personally. You are a pseudonym here, an amorphous concept of truth and justice. But really the story of Bored Elon Musk as its own entity, as its own living, breathing thing. Maybe you could just give us a kind of a brief snapshot to catch people up to where you are now, and then we can move forward from there.
Okay, so the Marvel origin story of Bored Elon. I'll keep it relatively quick, but Bored Elon as an identity on the internet is 8 years old. Started off as a parody of real Elon Musk, a meme that really kind of became its own entity, and really was focused on ideas that real Elon Musk would think of when he is, not busy launching rockets into space or building an electric car company. And about 2 years ago or so, my personal interest started to dive deeper into crypto and blockchain. And what used to be a very simple one-way communication from Bored Elon to a decent amount of fans. I think it's over 1.7 million fans right now. Started to shift, right? And I started having more opinions and interest in blockchain. And this year in particular, or I guess I'll say a year ago, 2021, I really started to dive into digital assets, NFTs, and also how that pertained to gaming, which was interesting because I spent most of my professional career in terms of the meat bag who runs this actual account in the video game space, in the traditional video games world. And I knew that world well, and I worked mostly for a company that I knew would never really be ready to dive into blockchain gaming, at least not for the next 5 or 10 years. So I kind of shifted very rapidly the Bored Elon identity towards being a bit less of a generalist and more towards an expert, a curator, a educator in the field of blockchain gaming, because it really was an intersection of my professional background and skill and my personal interest in the emerging industry of blockchain gaming. And I've got lots of things in the works and things that are coming. But that's a bit of past, present, and future for me, and would love to chat more about each in detail.
Yeah, so at like a high level, what is your vision of what this can become? And really the reason I'm curious is a lot of people do not have a really interesting gaming background or a lot of knowledge in the space. They're just kind of like they kind of came in from the hype. They may not be builders. So you have a really interesting perspective of like IRL gaming, and then in the weird, super cool land of crypto worlds, also gaming and crypto, and like, but what do you see as like the end game for that? What's the dream, the utopia for like the logical conclusion of when we've made it? What does that actually look like to you?
I've been thinking a lot about this, and as of today, meaning that I might change my mind in 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years, but as of today, I'm kind of thinking about gaming's evolution as it relates to blockchain in 3 phases. And I think part of the issue is that people are skipping ahead to later phases. But phase 1 is the really simple one that I think will be applicable to most gamers, whether they're into crypto or not, which is simply being able to not just buy digital assets, but actually fully own them, sell them, and transact with them. That's something that doesn't exist, right? So basically what that means is that at the beginning of the world of video games, you could buy a cartridge, a CD, or whatever, some sort of physical media, play the game, and then if you wanted to, you could sell that game to GameStop or to a friend or whatever. You had full rights to that property that you bought because it was a physical item. Nobody could take that away from you. Today, generally speaking, most games are in the cloud. They are things that you download. And then when you play those games, you buy assets in those games, and those assets only exist in that game. And while there are some marketplaces that let you, exchange goods and sell them, it's not the norm, and it's quite difficult, to be honest, to do that. But the reality is like the first phase of blockchain gaming, and the one that I think will be most appealing to most gamers, is simply just having ownership of your digital assets and digital property. That should be really appealing and easy to understand. Phase two is when you start building actual game economies that are fully integrated with blockchain, right? So it's not just that you own assets, but you're actually earning money by doing certain tasks in games. You are building your own economies. You are treating it almost like a bank that lays on top of a game. And all of this should be very fun. And then phase three, which some people are already starting to build out, but I don't think we're quite ready for it yet, is building games that will essentially last 1,000 years, whether the developers will be there or not. So if you think of a game like chess, the game itself is just a set of rules, or Tetris. Nobody owns Tetris, right? There are 100 versions of Tetris, and people can keep iterating and building on it. It's not easy to do that with games today that are really complex and massive, because they require tons of ongoing development and maintenance and updates and all these things, right? Like, you're not going to have Call of Duty running for 1,000 years with nobody managing it. But people are starting to build on-chain games that are a set of rules and are an established intellectual property, or IP, and do have scarce resources that then people can build on top of. And that's a little bit more like squishy and philosophical, but that's kind of the end game that I think we're moving towards. I don't know how long it'll take to get there. So thinking about all those three phases, what I'm most interested in right now is just phase one, is just educating video game players who are not currently involved in the blockchain space to understand that player ownership, or owning assets in the digital world, is valuable, and they should have more rights in that space. And I think that any sort of negativity or skepticism around blockchain gaming is going to start to alleviate if we focus most of our attention on that for now.
That's a really pragmatic approach to it. It's like walk before you can run. That's really an interesting take. I'm curious though, why is that? And I do want to come back and kind of talk about some of the issues there, but to go to that logical extremity and, like, have the shining vision, why is the vision purely based on having games live forever? I'm curious why, why didn't you go towards the full immersion VR, AR, we all live in a virtual world type of scenario? Do you see that being a part of one of these phases, or is that almost a dystopian future that you don't want to see?
Personally speaking, I think that is dystopian. It's part of the reason I've always had a struggle with VR, is because it's, when you're looking at someone immersed in that technology, it feels very distant, right? It is not a social activity for people who are in that physical space. It might be social because you're playing with other people in VR. But I think that's just like a personal reaction I've had to it. I think there's a lot of opportunities to build wonderful experiences and games in VR. And so the reason I didn't include it in this set of three phases is because I think VR and AR are technologies, and they are platforms, but they are not really tied to gaming, right? Like, when I think of gaming, I think of game mechanics, I think of economies, I think of goals, I think of intellectual property like characters and stories. And that can be built on a lot of different platforms, and VR and AR are one of those platforms, and they'll be a big part of it. But then in 10 or 20 years, there might be something completely different that we don't even know about, right? Like holographic, project it into your brain machine, right? And we play games in that. So to say that VR and AR is kind of the end state, I think is focusing on the wrong thing. When you think about like the console wars, even, right? Like, it started with like Nintendo, and then Genesis, and then Super Nintendo, and N64, and then PlayStation, and like, everybody was so focused on the hardware, but ultimately, digital gaming is evolving, not because of the hardware, like that part is making it really realistic and fun and cool. But I think it's the social elements and the massive storytelling that continues to just grow and improve that is really what is changing gaming. And the ability to just play with millions of other people around the world, like the fact that it's networked, that is how gaming is evolving more so than the platform. So it's a fair question. It's just not how I think about it.
Right on, right on. And I want to just dream in the future for a second, and then again, definitely we'll come back because I think there's a lot of interesting things as part of phase one that almost might be the most difficult phase to accomplish. But as far as like this dream of out in the future of people really being able to play and earn, or maybe even play and own a part of the value that, or capture part of the value that they're creating. I see this as like a vehicle for people all around the world to participate in something that's fun, that's not like a menial data entry task, that eventually will be where most people gravitate to once we solve a lot of the basic human needs issues that we have right now. Like, as we're seeing, the cost of energy is going down over time. So it's going to approach zero over time. Eventually, energy will be free. Eventually, a lot of the menial tasks that people do will be done by robots and artificial intelligence, regardless of whether that's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. In that future, or plus, in that future, people are going to have so much more time, and I think they're going to go towards games. Do you see that as a realistic future? And do you see what is being built now as setting up infrastructure to support that sort of worldview and what the world is moving towards?
I think that is a well, I don't want to say likely. I think it's a number that's way above 0% chance of that happening. I agree wholeheartedly that the amount of time that humans have to spend working is going to go down because of technology. You can just kind of watch the trajectory of how things have gone. Now, up until now, more technology and efficiency has led to people working the same amount but maximizing profits. And so the big question is that going to change, and will we realize sort of the Adam Smith prediction of only having to work 5 to 10 hours a week and getting everything done? I can't answer that, but I do think that in times in history when people were given the privilege of not having to worry as much about their livelihood, that did lead to things like creating art and reading and building and yes, playing games. And so I think that because games have emerged as such a accessible place to exercise creativity and socialize and immerse oneself in storytelling, it probably will be a very common place for people to spend their time and their brain power if they aren't having to work 40 hours a week. And so if that becomes the case, then yeah, that then translates to certain things will be lucrative in terms of like tasks in these games, right? Like certain people will want things, and if people have money and they want things, they will pay other people to do those things for them. And to me, like anybody who has a job today in the real world, quote unquote, where they really enjoy the work that they do, they're playing a game, right? They're getting paid to do something that they really love. Like I think about a real estate agent who loves selling houses, like talking to people and scouting for houses and like learning about different neighborhoods. Like that's a game to them, and they get paid for that game. And so you can translate all of those things to the video game space, right? Now, not everybody has a job that they maybe like or enjoy, and I hope that changes. But what I will say is that if people see an opportunity to do work in video games that maybe they, even if they don't enjoy it, and that pays them more than a less than desirable job in the real world, 100% people are going to migrate to that space. So I definitely see this as possible. I hope it is less dystopian than some people think it is. And I'm certainly going to play a role in trying to, point it in a positive direction. And I know you will too, Ben.
So, okay, I'm so glad that you made it personal because I totally see that. Like my whole mission here is to grow the metaverse because of all those promises that, we just kind of talked about of like I think it's going to be so important for everybody and for the world, but because we need people to have something to do with their time, and I think we all as a basic human right deserve the ability to not exist in a state of fight or flight, because then we can be creative and then we can explore things and produce and have fun, which is like the whole point of life is is to be happy and have fun. What's the promise of bored? Like if you were to be a beacon of hope for something, what is that promise? I know it's around everything that we're talking about, but like if you could really bring it together in a concise, like this is really what you're fighting for. Like, what is that?
I I like the word bored and boredom, this idea, because even though it sometimes is seen as a negative, I think in the world we live in today, it's a very important state of being. Because when you're bored, it often leads to curiosity, which then leads to learning, which then can maybe lead to creativity. And it's really hard to have creativity if you're constantly bombarded by responsibilities or information. And so I'm trying to kind of represent and champion this idea of clearing your mind and being bored and then letting yourself, you know, just kind of stumble into interesting ideas that then maybe lead you down the path of bettering yourself, learning about things, and then contributing to the world. So I'm trying to rebrand the word bored, if you will, and I think it works really nicely um, in the sort in relation to gaming, right? Because gaming is often an answer to boredom, and I think that gaming can be a place to socialize and be creative and do interesting things, as opposed to, like, say, watching TV, which is like a very one way, content consumption activity, um, or something else that is a bit more sort of like mindless. So I see gaming as a positive response to boredom, but I also think that forcing yourself to be bored is really important as well. And so, in this scenario we discussed, in the future where people do have more free time, my hope is that if they have 20 extra hours a week, they're not spending 20 hours a week on gaming, right? Maybe half that time is being out in nature and like not being exposed to any kind of screens and just being completely like isolated, so that they can actually have these thoughts that are hard to have when you are exposed to so much content. So boredom is both a hope for people, and it is also a, uh, a path that leads you towards a lot of the things that I'm interested in, which is gaming, creativity, building, and helping others learn.
Dude, it's literally like you read the my past of the last like 4 months, 4 or 5 months. It's like that almost perfectly describes what happened and actually the genesis of the Crypto Gaming Institute as a whole. Because months ago, I was gaming like all the time. Like that was my career as like a gamer, a streamer, so on and so forth. And I was gaming for like 12 to 15 hours a day, to the point where I actually messed up my wrists and
Mm.
I physically was forced to stop. In that moment, that freed up an extra 12 to 15 hours a day. And I was so bored that I then went down this crazy hole, rabbit hole, that led to the discovery of everything we're talking about right now, and the world of crypto gaming and the metaverse and this beautiful ecosystem that's being created. But the boredom was what led me to that path. How did you come across this idea? This like, where did how did that click for you? What was that aha moment where you're like, ah, yes, boredom? Like, how did that? What was the genesis of that thought, that idea?
I think that, well, there's two things. I mean, I I think I retroactively came to this thinking, after coming up with the board Elon Musk account. My assumption was that 8 years ago when he put out the white paper for the Hyperloop, which he basically just like put out and open source, so suggesting that whoever has time to go build it should build it. I assumed he had a moment of boredom, right, in between doing all the things that he did. Maybe he took a walk and he was like, you know what? Or he was sitting in traffic, probably in a car, pissed off, and thought, okay, I'm not doing anything right now. Nothing is interrupting me. And I'm going to have this brilliant idea for how to solve this current problem that I have. And that's where this like idea came from. And so that led to this character of Bored Elon Musk, which is like, what else does he come up with when he's in the shower or on the toilet? And then, and that's a common thing. Like, I think a lot of us do have some of our best thoughts in those moments. Like for me, when I take walks or in the middle of the night when I should be sleeping, but I'm not being exposed to anything, is when I have some of my best thinking. And as like that, as I thought more about that, and I guess just like recognized that was happening, it reinforced this idea of boredom being a really important state of mind. And then just wanting to kind of rebrand that word again as not a negative, but a positive. So I'd like to think, I'd love to tell you that I had this grand plan 8 years ago when I made the account, but I kind of just stumbled into it. But then more importantly, just kind of analyzed it and thought about how it really correlated, I guess, to my own thinking.
Well, you ran with it, which is the important thing. Like you then executed on it, which is what matters. So okay, so I'm curious. Let's jump back to these three stages, or these three phases rather, that you were talking about. First of all, was this a result of your past experiences in gaming, or was it more of this is what you're seeing just out in the marketplace, just from having looked at it and like sitting in this space like a freaking eye of Mordor, just looking at what's going on and just realizing everything? Or like, how did you build this thesis of the three phases? And then how do you think we're going to actually accomplish the first one?
The Eye of Mordor answer is definitely the most interesting one. I had it installed yesterday. It's in my office. It is based on what I've seen over the last 12 months, and I think that's why I prefaced by telling you like this was my thinking as of today. Not as of 2 months from now, but based on my experience in the traditional video games world. I lived through the moment where games started to transition from kind of the typical buy a game, play it, and you're done model to free to play. And when free to play gaming started to emerge, it got a lot of criticism, and gamers really felt like it was just kind of another attempt at squeezing money out of them. Because the reality is that with free to play games, maybe you're playing the game for free, but the in-app purchases over time add up to significantly more than you would have spent for a $50 or $60 game. I think about Hearthstone from Blizzard, and like how many hundreds of dollars, probably thousands of dollars, honestly, that I've spent on that game. And so like companies figured out that, hey, this model works. Let people play and for free. And the money will come over time. And over time, it really did become more popular. And as much griping and as much criticism as free-to-play gaming took when it first was launched, the reality is that has become the norm. If you look at one of the biggest games on the planet, Fortnite, that is a game that is completely free, and Epic is worth billions of dollars. The beauty, though, of it, and the way they kind of tweaked the model, is that they made it purely based on aesthetics, right? Like you don't have to buy anything in Fortnite. You could just play the game for free. But if you want to show status and kind of signal to your friends that you are a participant in this world and you want to like show your creativity, you can buy skins and you can buy different items that will give you a sense of differentiation. But you don't have to do that if you don't want to. So it took a good decade for us to get from the beginning of free to play, which was like people are very angry, to Fortnite, where it's a massive business and people are willingly jumping into it. So I think we're, with blockchain gaming, we're in those early days, and there's a lot of skepticism around why do games need blockchain. And there's a lot of skepticism around blockchain in general, right? Like that's starting to change, but there's still, massive questions around why is it needed. So I think my take is these three phases are kind of where I see things going, but it's also changing so much more rapidly compared to the experience I had in the traditional gaming space that I really don't want to make projections beyond a year because it's just too early to say. But it's exciting, right? Because there's so much to learn every single day, and my goal, despite my visceral reaction sometimes, is to try to be positive and try to just kind of like bring people along in a really nice way. Because even though it feels good and it's sometimes easy to like dunk on people and explain to them why they're so horribly wrong about their assumptions, you're not going to win people over that way. So I'm doing my very best to be a positive educator, and worst case scenario, just ignore people who are vehemently, disagreeing with me.
Totally. That actually reminds me of something that Dale Carnegie said in one of my favorite books of all time, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Nobody wins an argument, because if you win an argument, you still lose because of the bad blood that's created from winning. So it's
Yeah.
just not really worth it to argue with people. And so that's super interesting. And I definitely agree with you that the freemium model has taken over. I mean, the game I was playing 12 to 15 hours of every single day was League of Legends. And that game is so freaking fun. And you want to be so good at it. And it's so competitive. Like, you can't help but spend money in it. I mean, you physically can't help yourself. I can't wait for the moment when people realize all of this money that I'm putting in the world of crypto gaming, well, now that can actually go to a place that everybody can see what you own, and that can be an expression of who you are, and you can then trade that, and you can sell that, or you can just hold it, and it actually retains value to where it becomes more of an investment than just a piece of consumption. And so I'm curious from that perspective, and I have my own thesis of how a game like that could pull it off. But that's the most popular game in the world right now, arguably, but one of the top ones definitely. um, in that sort of scenario, how do you think games like that are going to integrate this idea of play to earn, in-game assets, and ownership? Like, what is that? How do you think that's going to evolve for them?
If I'm putting myself in the shoes of kind of traditional video game executives, I think that it is too late for established properties to completely switch to an on-chain model, because it these are publicly traded companies that have to do what's right for shareholders, and that means delivering ongoing revenue slash profits to the ownership of the company, to investors, etc. I think the middle ground that we'll probably see is AAA games introducing scarce, ownable assets in games that people can buy and freely sell to each other. Now, that might happen on sort of a custom marketplace, whether it's on chain or not, like an EA chain or an Epic chain, or it could be interoperable between their own properties, right? So like really massive game studios, they have lots of different games, and maybe you can have like buying and selling and trading between all of their games, right? So like any Ubisoft game or any Activision game. That's kind of the most likely scenario. I think the smaller studios and also up and coming blockchain games, they can build all of this from scratch, where ownership and potential upside, meaning like revenue, is being shared with players, because those players kind of invested into the development of that game. I think from an investor standpoint, like I'm more interested in small to medium sized game makers versus trying to find ways to monetize with those AAA game studios. I just don't think they can move back in time. If I were like a Square a Square Enix, or even like the likes of a Sony, I would spin off completely different business units to build on-chain games from scratch, because trying to take an existing ecosystem is just going to be really, really too hard, and it's going to be a tough pill to swallow for investors in a publicly traded company.
So I would that's a very interesting take. I think I was kind of more asking like how the model itself might adapt. For example, like for a League of Legends model, right? They have their normal in-game currency that you use to buy access to the characters. That's their blue currency, and then they have like their yellow currency that you pay for, that you can then buy skins that are the purely cosmetic things that we're talking about. So like, for example, one way that I could see that playing out, because they want to be able to sell skins to everybody, but maybe like how that model could evolve, taking the League example, let's say there was like a League V2 blockchain style. Well, instead of having skins that anybody can buy an infinite amount of, maybe they do a limited release of those skins, and then so they have some scarcity to it, but like maybe they add in something really interesting where there's a documentation of the history of who owned that skin and what happened while they owned it. So like you could have the top 5 players, or the top player in the world, playing with this one skin of this one character, and maybe 1,000 people own that same skin, but this could be skin 997 that this particular player owned, and then that skin would have stats. So like maybe that was a skin this player owned when she won the world championship for that game in 2023, and the history is what makes it valuable in addition to the scarcity. So I'm trying to think of like how they adapt from that perspective, or how games and models adapt from that perspective. What are your thoughts on the models that are going to be the most successful, and how they can actually build real value beyond just saying there's 1,000 of these, and good luck being one of the ones who gets it, and then it's just based on the scarcity.
I think your scenario is a very likely one as well. And what I would add to that is, if you have a scarce resource that is obtained by somebody who accomplishes something in a game, I think the key is to only allow it to be transferred to other people who are at an equal achievement level. So what a lot of gamers criticize is like this idea of pay to win, right? Like I didn't spend enough time to like build up my skills or achieve a certain level, but I can just pay this guy $100 and then get this awesome weapon and just blow everybody away, and I don't have to work for it. So that sucks. That makes everybody mad. But in your example, if you're like a top 10,000 player in the world and you get a skin or you get some sort of in-game item, you should only then be able to sell it to somebody else who is also in the top 10,000. I think that slight nuance would make everybody feel happy, because like, yes, you can transfer your assets to other people, but you can't just sell it to a whale who hasn't earned it. Because a lot of people have spent time and effort to achieve these things, and they don't want that to be diminished by other people just coming in with money. So I think that's kind of where you'll see things go. And then in addition to kind of the scenario you laid out, I think it just comes down to having liquidity for in-game items where, okay, there's an in-game economy. Can I trade that in-game economy for, US dollars or euros or whatever it might be? But the challenge to that is, of course, the game publishers would much rather sell an unlimited number of items and have everybody buy from them versus buying stuff from each other. It's kind of like the love-hate relationship video game companies had with GameStop. Like they like the fact that GameStop encouraged other people to discover new games, but when you brought a game to GameStop and sold it to them, and then GameStop sold that game to somebody else, that secondary sale did not help the game publisher, right? So they love digital downloads because everyone's buying the game for themselves and not repeating it from other people. So this is the love-hate relationship. So for game publishers to switch to this model, they're going to have to make up for the loss of the sort of one-to-one sales that they were making before, and that might come in the form of like
royalties.
Royalties, exactly. So like the theory is the royalties will add up to more. I'm not sure all of them are convinced that is the case yet. But if they start to see that that does work, then you will see a lot more AAA games that are switching to this model.
Who do you think right now is, or maybe a couple of projects, but who do you think is actually in the lead as far as crypto gaming is concerned? Obviously, we all know of Axie, and but they have some of their own problems. I mean, they have a very inflationary in-game currency where the value's dropping like it's hot, right? So that's not good. Who do you think's actually doing this the best right now? And who do you think is going to really lead the charge as far as nailing this whole phase one situation?
I'll mention a few, and I want to note that I'm an advisor slash and or investor in these. So I don't want to pump my bags too much, but I the reason I wanted to work with or invest in these companies is because I felt like they were leading the charge or had a lot of potential in the space.
Dude, pump away. There's no chance. There's no chance that you're going to risk your reputation supporting a project that sucks. So you've already done the vetting for us.
Sure. Yeah. I always believe disclosing is important just as a way to protect your reputation, and obviously everybody should do their own research. But first up is Boxy Tactics. So the Boxy team is building a turn-based strategy game. So anybody who's played like Final Fantasy Tactics or Advanced Wars or Wargroove, they'll know this style of game. It's on the simpler side in terms of in comparison to like a lot of the games you see today, but that's okay. The idea is like start simple and then build a massive world after that. And it's launching later in January. Another is Mini Nations or Mini Royale Nations, which right now primarily is a first-person shooter, very much in the style of Fortnite. And both of those games, I will note, they're very much like, hey, this is a game that's really fun to play, and blockchain has not much to do with it. Like you can own your assets and all that, but they're just fun games to play. And I think that's important, right? Like requiring people to spend thousands of dollars to play games is not a great way to make it accessible. So those two titles are great, and Mini Nations is already available to play via browser, which is awesome. So you don't have to have like a powerful gaming PC. And then the last I wanted to note was Cypher, Cypher.xyz, if you want to check them out. They're building an MMORPG, I would say in the vein of League of Legends, and have a pretty massive team, are thinking very deeply about in-game economics, and are just really great community builders. And so I can't speak to the quality of the game because it's still being built. But what I will say is that I've been very impressed by how thoughtful they are, and how good they are at rallying their community and keeping them excited, honestly, during game development, which takes a very, very long time. And a lot of times people, get sort of sick of being hyped up and want to just play. So they do a great job as well. So those three titles and those groups, I would say are definitely leading the charge from like an indie studio standpoint, that are kind of starting from scratch and building brand new IP.
I love it. I love it. I appreciate the alpha. So we're getting close to time here. At first I wanted to kind of go through those three phases, but I actually want to pivot here and just ask, like, what are things that you would like to talk about that you think are important things to talk about in the world of blockchain gaming and crypto gaming that nobody else is really talking about and that's not on people's radar?
I think, and it's somewhat self-serving, but I think that right now the dialogue seems to be about the lack of quality games that people can play in the blockchain gaming space. And based on teams that I know that are working on upcoming games, I think a year from now we're going to have the opposite problem, which is like there's way too much to pick from, and I don't know what to play, and my backlog is very long. And that's the reality for like the traditional gaming world, right? We're all 5 or 6 games deep, and like there's just too much games out there that we don't have time to play. So I think that's where curation and getting good advice from friends on what to check out is going to be really important. And that's something that I'm going to try to impact as well. And I'm launching a project in a few months, which I don't want to reveal the name yet. But I'm gonna play a role in trying to help introduce both people who are interested in blockchain gaming and traditional video gamers to the latest and greatest and best games that are coming. And so definitely would encourage people to sign up for my newsletter when they get a chance, because I'll probably announce that project there first. But yeah, we're going to be in a place very, very soon where there's just more to pick from than we have time for, and I am here for that problem.
I love it. Do you see a world where, and this is actually kind of the utopia that I envision, where we can jump from game to game? There's like a freaking portal that we just hop in and then pop up in another game. Our NFTs are actually our characters, and the items our characters use within the games. Everything's interoperable, and we can just move fluidly between everything. Is that ever going to exist?
I think sort of. A lot of people will cite that it is difficult to move from game to game because every game is built different on different engines with different parameters, different physics, literally all that. And I agree with that sentiment. You can't port a character that's built for Super Smash Brothers into Fortnite, or into Rocket League, or into League of Legends, right? Like they're just different specs. What I think will be interoperable is IP, is characters, right? So what you'll have is people who own they own the rights to certain characters, right? They could be Bored Apes, or they could be punks, or whatever they might be. And then certain games will opt to build skins for these popular IPs, right? So there will be a Bored Ape version of a Rocket League car. There will be a Bored Ape version of a Super Smash Brothers fighter, of a Fortnite skin. And so you're not going to be able to take your character from one game to another, like at an unlimited level, but there might be 10 games where you can play as your character. And it comes down to the studios that are making these games and opting to make skins for these popular emerging or existing IPs will just do it based on the size of the community. So if an NFT community has 1 million people strong, games are probably going to try to plug that type of character into their game. So that's the likely future I see: more IP interoperability versus sort of Ready Player One, where everything is interconnected. It's not quite how the world works, and I don't think that's how the digital world is going to work either.
Amazing. Well, Bored, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I know you're a super busy, you're a super busy person, so I just want to thank you very, very much for sharing some of your time with me and everybody on the listening side.
No, I love nerding out about this kind of stuff. So thanks for having me on the show, and appreciate the 5 so's. That was very very generous.
Well deserved. Last question for you: what should I be asking you that I wouldn't think to ask?
I think I will cleverly use this opportunity to plug an upcoming side project, which is metamars.org. It is being driven by a small team, and I'm mostly just kind of advising and helping fund it. But it is a no-loss arcade where people will be able to deposit money, play games. The money will all be pooling together and earning interest, and then that interest will be dispersed as prizes to the best players. So our first game hopefully will launch in about a month, so late January, early February. But if anyone wants more info on what's coming, I would say go to metamars.org and check it out, and we'd love to have more players join us.
And just to confirm, this is what we're talking about, right? This is it right here.
I don't know if you posted it. I can't see what you're.
Oh, gotcha. Trying to share my screen here.
That's it. Yep.
This is
that's
it.
it.
Awesome. I love the branding. I love the
Thank
colors. You. It's exciting. Okay,
Very, very
right on.
Martian theme. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. All right, man. Well, hey, I appreciate it. Everybody go check this out. Just hop in as quickly as humanly possible. If you're a robot, as quickly as robotically possible. But thank you again, Bored. Thank you, everybody watching and listening. Love y'all. See you on